Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of supernatural fantasy and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Timeless. So in this episode, we had the team going back to 1944, where they crossed paths with Ian Fleming, the real-life James Bond who went off to write the books of James Bond, apparently. I didn't know he was actually a spy, too, because I didn't even really know much about, I don't know that much about the dude who wrote James Bond. All I remember, I came across, some TV series associated with the author somewhere on Netflix once upon a time, and I just left, I never really looked at it, so I don't really know that. So it was kind of interesting finding out that it's actually the author. It's not like, oh, the books were based on a real person, in which they were, but they were based on the author's experiences and everything. Interestingly enough, Ian is played by the same actor who played Robin Hood on Once Upon a Time. That actor is very charming. He was a very charming dude as, very charming and honorable dude as Robin Hood. Same thing as Ian, getting all flirty with Lucy, and it's like, whoa, dude, I think James Bond just hit on Lucy, and she's liking it. Every time you kept seeing Wyatt, being like, oh, geez, really? I guess it's because part of me was kind of like the way you see it. It seems like there might be something between him and Lucy, but I guess that it's maybe that's some way of him kind of getting over, moving past his wife to a certain extent. I don't know. It seemed like there might be something there. I don't know, or whether it's just like, yo, I just care for you. I don't know. Like, it's nothing more than that. Why label it? Maybe we're just like, hey, I care for you. Leave it at that. I don't know. It's a very interesting episode with many different things. Like, for one, find out a little bit more about Lucy and a little bit about Wyatt. Finding out about Lucy, kind of like she's kind of shaking because, Wyatt noticed it earlier when they were in the bar. And I was thinking, like, okay, it's okay, she's freaking out. It's no wonder you're going undercover in a bar filled with Nazis. So it's kind of understandable why you'd be shaking like that. But then later on, it just seems like she's kind of spacing out. I was thinking, like, okay, is this some kind of time thing that's happening to her? No, she's kind of freaking out because apparently, doing what she's doing puts a lot of stress on her. Essentially, she brings up a moment from her past where basically she was on her way to tell her mom, hey, I'm quitting school, I'm dropping out of school, I'm not going to do this whole history career that I'm currently on. It's like, I'm just drop out my sophomore year and I'm gonna go join a band. Car accident led her car into some water, and basically the car started filling up with water. She got out of it luckily, but that whole situation kind of changed her a lot because she started wanting to kind of control things in her life. And this whole experience is kind of throwing everything out of control. It's like time traveling and everything, and it's like things are constantly changing and things that are changing her life. So her life isn't within her control anymore because every little change to the past is affecting her life in ways she wouldn't be able. Obviously, her sister Amy is one great example. Like I said, positive way because it's like her mom. Which, side note, we still not going back to that conversation about hey, what's up with my real dad at her engagement party or whatever? Like, her mom was like, oh, why are you bringing this up now? And that was the last we heard of it. So maybe that'll pop up next episode. I'm not sure. But she basically feels like every time she gets in that time machine, she feels like she's in that moment of drowning again. And it's just, she doesn't have control. And it's, Lucy seems like the type of person that has everything, all her ducks in a row that she does kind of seem like controlling, because even the way she is in the show, just no, we can't change the timeline, which it's it's understandable. It's but dude, you can't, that's the dilemma of changing the timeline. It's who's to say things aren't going to be better? I mean, that's the thing. Could be better, but they could also be so much worse. Because in this episode, when they first pop in, Wyatt ends up killing two Nazis. He's like, okay, Lucy's like, okay, I get it, why you had to kill the first guy, but when they had to kill this guy, I thought you were going to do something else, what, tie him up, just for him to get out later and end up causing problems, which makes sense. But at the same time, it's you don't know what's going to happen later on. It's is it really such a bad thing for me to kill Nazis? Really, that's where we're still drawing the line there. It's they're Nazis. That should be the ultimate, go ahead and kill them type of situation, but once again, you don't know. What I found fascinating about the whole situation is I'm surprised that hasn't happened sooner. Someone stumbling upon where they drop off the lifeboat. I thought that was kind of fascinating. That it just, they happen to land pretty close to a Nazi, and he's just standing out in front like, yo, what the hell? And it's like a struggle, like, Wyatt's kind of getting woozy, obviously, from the time travel, trying to pick out his gun, ends up shooting him. It's like, ooh, that was real close. Real close. And we also brought up like I kind of skipped over it, so I kind of go back to Wyatt's reason for doing what he does. The reason why he was like, oh yeah, anytime he feels bad about letting Lincoln die or, letting Nazis live, it's because his grandfather was a soldier. He's actually saying, like, the fact is that where they were in 1944, his grandfather is off somewhere else right now, younger than him, fighting Nazis and stuff. And it's just like his grandfather was the one he fights for, because he kind of had in his words, a son of a bitch dad. What that actually means, I don't know. I don't know whether that's them being like, whether he was an abusive dad, just wasn't there, whatever the case may be. It seemed like the person, the one that kind of balanced that relationship out was the fact that his grandfather was there to kind of take care of him. And I guess his grandfather being a soldier is what kind of inspired Wyatt to become one. So anytime, he admires his grandfather the most, he loves his grandfather. So it's like anytime, he's letting something like that happen, he feels like he's letting his grandfather down in some shape or form. And he's basically telling Lucy if she wants to kind of, keep going and kind of get over that hump, that basically she needs to find out what she needs to fight for. Now, he talked about the fact is that he was over the hump, that basically either you kind of push forward and kind of get over it, or you kind of crack underneath the pressure. He said he was over the hump because, it's like you can talk about your problems that helps, but it's like the fact is he doesn't talk. Lucy brought it up. It's like, oh, you don't talk about it. He's like, because I'm over the hump. Is he though? I mean, because I'm pretty sure he's probably back on that hump because of his wife's situation, so... But I love the fact that they kept geeking, like, in particular, Wyatt kept geeking over, it's just like, Ian Fleming freaking working with James Bond, especially when they go through that. It's like, oh yeah, this, back in the day, these priests would kind of like use this tunnel accent, and then like Wyatt says the name of it, and Rufus like, oh, how did you know that? He's like, Skyfall. And then there was a moment when Lucy and, Ian were kind of saying their goodbyes. He's like, oh, maybe I'll take a drop by America. And he's like, will you be waiting for me? And she's like, most definitely not. And then as he's walking in, he says, never say never. And then you have Wyatt at the end saying, again? And then Ian kind of gives him a look like, what the hell were you talking about? And then there's some buys. And then everyone turns to him and is like, what the hell was that? And he's just like, I'm sorry. I can't help it. End up coming back to the present, end up finding out it's like, hey, their whole misadventure that they went on ended up turning out to be, got turned into another James Bond movie. So now there's actually another Sean Connery James Bond movie out there. And it's like, oh, it's like a new James Bond movie. It's like, no, it came out like 1960. Nah, but it's new to me. He's just super psyched about it. A lot of, like, this episode was a really good episode for Rufus in regards of character development. I guess you want to get all, put a name to it and everything. Because he ended up having a conversation with two people. First with Ian, kind of like, how do you handle the whole spy thing? Like, doing what you do. And for Ian, he was like, I just do it. I don't look at it as lying. I think of it as me just doing my mission. Doing and saying whatever I need to do my mission. He's like, in this spy game, there's no such thing as trust. There's only the mission. So, because, Rufus is conflicted about the whole, like, recording the whole Wyatt and Lucy situation. Then even has a conversation with the scientist that, because, trailing back a little bit, obviously the scientist that they had to save, who, like, Wyatt was like, okay, Flynn's on the other side of him, okay, this guy stepped away, I guess I'll just shoot him and then shoot Flynn. But then Lucy stops him and it's like, yo, that dude is important. Essentially, he ends up captured by the Allies. The Allies use him. Eventually, later on down the road, he kind of helps in the Cold War. He ends up helping America be the first one to get to the moon and stuff like that. So he's very important to history. But Wyatt's kind of like, the fact of the matter is he doesn't get punished for what he did. It's almost, in a sense, it's almost like he gets rewarded for doing what he did. Like, yes, he did some cool things and everything, but it still doesn't make up for the fact is that he did a lot of stuff for the Nazis that ended up killing a lot of people. And for him, because this kind of ties back into it, is the interesting conversation with Rufus. Because Rufus is like, don't you feel bad about what happened? Because it's like, they're looking at him just taking notes after they captured him and everything. It's like, he doesn't care. And he says as much as like, I don't care. I don't have allegiances to anyone. Whoever can help me reach my goal, I'm fine with that. It's like, I want to get to the moon. I don't care how I get there, like how I go about getting to that goal. And, for Rufus, it's like, what you've done has killed tens upon thousands of people. tens of thousands of people and you're okay with that. He's like, I've been in a similar situation basically with the whole time machine, and it's like those people's deaths kind of weigh on me. But then he's like, but if that, you weren't you're thinking about that now, but you weren't thinking about that when you built whatever it is you built. At that point in time, you didn't think about the consequences, because if you had, you wouldn't have built it in the first place. So it kind of leaves Rufus a little, you see it in his face, kind of a little brokenhearted in the fact of like if, he, at that time, he was so excited about doing something cool, just time travel is just amazing. But then he didn't even think about the consequences of the fact is, what if someone else got their hands on it? It's like, yeah, the concept of time travel is fun and dandy until someone starts using that device and going around screwing with time, hence what Flynn did. So, really quickly, apparently the whole atom bomb core thing was about getting their ship, the mothership, a better battery, essentially. It's like, oh, it'll last 300 years. So, because originally they had to keep popping back to the present to recharge and whatnot. It's kind of what the team, I guess, does too, except they never really talk about the fact that they're charging the battery. But it's like, with this, they no longer have to charge. Which I was kind of wondering, it's like, okay, is it... Because I was kind of halfway expecting Flynn to kind of kill Anthony, but he didn't. So I was like, okay, I guess Anthony's still a part of it. It's like, there's something out of this he's getting. I mean... Maybe whatever he's doing for the sake of his family too, because brought up before, Rufus, like, his family's important to him and everything. So I don't know, still not clear, because we get a little bit of a look, like Flynn's explaining himself. He's like, you don't realize I am a patriot, you just don't see the greater good. He hasn't brought it back to that certain extent. He did it, what was it, last episode, the episode before last, being like, you don't realize you're on my side. It's just, you just haven't reached that point yet. And it's just like, the fact is, Lucy, I guess the reason why Lucy hasn't said anything to anyone, because she doesn't believe Flynn, even though he has a notebook and everything. But I guess in her mind, it's just like, oh, that's just him trying to justify what he's doing. The fact is, he's hurting a lot of people, saying it's for the greater good. It's not. You're a traitor to your country, and you're just saying that you're a patriot, and just all of this is just horseshit. So, which I'm sure there is some truth to what he said, because the fact of the matter is, it's perspective. Because some, like, you might be thinking like, oh, he's doing a lot of evil. In his mind, he's doing a good job. I mean, really, for him, it's all about stopping Rittenhouse, which we kind of got a look at this episode, because there's a whole conversation with Mason, which something kind of brought up, like, really quickly about Mason. The fact is, he has that large wardrobe. Now, what I'm guessing is, most likely is like, well, he saw the fact is that this isn't ending anytime soon, which he kind of brought up. So he kind of got the whole, like, all these different wardrobes ready, based on area as well as time. It's like, oh, these are clothes from New York, 1940, or these are clothes from UK in 1890, or whatever. So part of me was wondering, like, why does he have that? Like, is there more to Mason than meets the eye? Which, I mean, obviously there is. In my mind, for whatever reason, I was thinking like, oh, is he connected? Has he been doing some time travel himself? I was like, how did he get all this in such a short amount of time? It's like, well, he's well funded, I'm sure, and just like I said, plenty of time. It's like, well, this isn't ending anytime soon. Rather than kind of picking clothes out at, just kind of like getting clothes ready on the fly of like, oh, we got to go to like, 1957. It's like, I guess we gotta get some clothes that were made in 1957. Rather than that, just going to have a full closet stocked of it. That's kind of interesting. So you don't have to worry about like, man, they just keep buying clothes all the time. It's like, well, they've got a whole rack of clothes. So anytime they pull out stuff, it's kind of like, yeah, they pull that from the closet. But you have Rufus being like, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. Forget it. I'm just going to, I'm done lying. Mason's like, I'm deep in this whole Rittenhouse thing, and it's like, I need you, buddy. Please don't do this. But Rufus turned his back on him and was kind of, sorry, I just can't do it anymore. But when he was driving, what I could assume is him driving home, his car kind of like the electronics kind of shut out. Talks to a guy, and the guy is basically like, hey, dude, keep doing what you're doing. The fact of the matter is, Mason's actually looking out for you because he's worried about he's concerned for you. He's like, doing what you're doing is protecting a lot of people. It's protecting you. It's protecting me. It's protecting your family. Kept throwing that in his face, kind of basically saying like, hey, you don't do what you're doing. Who can guarantee your family's safety? So that's kind of a shame that's kind of been thrown in his face. But it's like, we've seen one face of Rittenhouse. I thought Rittenhouse was just one person, but apparently it's a collective of people, because he said these Rittenhouse people. So it's a whole group collective. And even the fact is that they were able to do that to Rufus's car says something like they have access to like some high grade technology or something like that. I mean, really, I say that, but it could easily just be an EMP. But really, like, his electronics wouldn't have popped back on if it was just a regular EMP, because usually they knock power out for a long period of time. It takes a while before power can kind of surge again. Not unless it's a special EMP they've crafted or whatever. But it's like, I'm curious to know what their whole thing is, why Flynn wants to stop them so badly, and like, why is it that Lucy sent him on this mission? Why not someone like Wyatt or Rufus? But then again, it's kind of like, well, you can't have your, I guess it makes sense because it's like, hey, you can't interfere with your own timeline, which I'm waiting for that to happen, because I know it's going to come up in some shape or form. At some point they're going to cross into their own timelines. Like I said, like I brought it up, was it last episode? I'm pretty sure it's definitely going to happen with Wyatt. I just get the feeling like he's probably going to be the main one. And the fact is, they threw out that whole story about Lucy kind of explaining why she's freaking out a little bit. I don't know, like, it's such a specific story. It could be just, background as to why she's freaking out, sure. But I feel like it's a lot more to that. Like, that story's going to play out a little bit later on, because it's like, that event changed her. It made her get into history and stuff like that. It also made her very different about her life, that she was very more controlling and stuff like that. So I'm very curious to know, like, where that will all, like, head to. Like, we got, like I said, we kind of got peeks into everyone's life. We don't really know everything there is to know about everyone, because everyone else is, we're still learning stuff here and there. Don't really know that much about Mason. I did like the fact is Lucy was like, you know what? I got some ground rules. One, I need you to give me a cover job that kind of explain why I'm working here, because you can't really be saying like, oh, I'm working with Homeland Security, because it's like, oh, that's a big no-no. So basically, she has to explain like why she's leaving 3 o'clock in the morning, because I'm sure, her mom's going to be like, oh, where have you been? What are you doing? It's like, she can't keep using like teaching at the college or whatever as an excuse, because that won't explain why she's leaving early, like in the middle of the night, or why she has to suddenly leave and stuff like that. But it's like, if she uses that, like, I'm actually surprised that she came up with it. They're like, oh yeah, here's a cover story for you to kind of explain why you're always disappearing all the time. So that kind of works. So I'm sure that's going to come back by, like, I'm just waiting for the moment where like her mom ends up going like, yo, I looked into it. Your job's not real. What the hell are you doing? What the hell you got yourself mixed into? That type of thing. But also the fact is that they're going to help her fix the timeline back to the way things originally were, I guess. Because really this all dates back to the whole Hindenburg thing. If they can go back and fix that to the point where it was, it kind of does everything, I guess. It's like, well, really you have to go back to the entire beginning and stop Flynn. I mean, some shape or form, without going directly back to that point in time, you have to stop Flynn from ever taking the mothership in the first place, so. But also, it's like, you're going to help me get my sister back. I'm already kind of working with the lady that, Rufus and her kind of have a thing. Her helping her kind of get her sister back to a certain extent. It's like, you guys are going to help me with that. Figure this all mess out. Here's my conditions, or I walk. Because they do need her as part of the team. Because, I feel like Lucy in this episode also felt like, I don't know where I fit into this team. Because it's like, I'm not a soldier like you. I'm not a pilot like, Rufus is here because he's smart. He knows how to operate the lifeboat, but I don't really serve a purpose. I'm a history buff. That's literally my purpose. But I feel like she's obviously underselling herself, because there's a lot more to her. I mean, that even we as the audience still don't know yet. But it's also because it's like, if it weren't for you, they wouldn't know half the crap to do. They wouldn't know like, oh, not to do this, not to do that, because it's like, that's going to severely screw over the timeline. But because bringing it back a little bit is like, because even, Ian had himself being like, no, I got to kill this dude. He's a scientist and he's killed a lot of people. I'm about to say Flynn. Wyatt agreed with him, but chose to believe with what Lucy said, because, it's kind of one of the ends justify the means. It's for the greater good, which is kind of like, well, that's what Flynn said. It's like, you saving this guy and giving him to the allies. It's like, yeah, I mean, it worked out to a certain, in regards. So it's kind of like, but who's to say, that's your version of the greater good? Who's to say it's not like Flynn's version of the greater good? Like I said, it really comes down to perspective. It's like, what's justice kind of thing, like what's really good, like, because they're painting a picture of just like, hey, Lucy, you got to realize you're on the wrong side. You're doing what you're doing is protecting Rittenhouse. Maybe they have some kind of connection to time travel and stuff like that. Maybe they've kind of manipulated the timeline to get in a powerful position and kind of like, oh, they oversee everything. Like they've been to the past or they're from the future or something like that. And they went to the past and kind of did all this. I don't know. There's a heavy line of mystery that I'm trying to figure out. And it's like, I have no idea what that's all about. I'm very interested to see, I doubt that's something we're going to get answered immediately. It's probably going to be little pieces here and there that you have to be like, oh, I kind of picked that up. Oh, I picked that up. So it's like, oh, this is how the pieces are possibly going to fit together. I can't even really fathom where to go, but it's going to be interesting to see where they find out. I mean, where all the pieces line up. But that's really all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.